Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Explanation of what we're talking about. President Trump and Senator Lindsey Graham would have you believe that the FBI was out of line when they sent armed agents to arrest the president's former advisor, Roger Stone. Mr. Trump told the Daily Caller it was, quote, very, very disappointing scene, and said he might ask for a review of the FBI's tactics. Senate Judiciary Committee Chair Lindsey Graham went even further, asking FBI Director Chris Wray to brief his committee on the raid, the number of agents, the tactics, and the specific timing of the arrest. To review, 6 a.m. Friday morning, at least a dozen armed FBI agents came to Stone's house, knocked on the door, and ordered him to surrender. No shots were fired. There has been a suggestion that the FBI did not need the show of force. They could have asked Stone to turn himself in. But look at this filing from last Thursday, the day before the raid took place. It says Robert Mueller was worried that letting anyone know what was coming would, quote, increase the risk of the defendant fleeing and destroying or tampering with evidence. Now remember, that part of the reason Stone was indicted in the first place was that because he made, quote, multiple false statements to a House committee, those are lies, about his interactions regarding WikiLeaks, and falsely denied possessing records that contained evidence of these very interactions. If Mueller was worried that Stone would destroy those records he had previously denied having, that could explain the raid right there. And these tactics, they're not completely out of the ordinary for the FBI or even the Mueller investigation. Remember, agents seized documents and other materials in early morning raid on Paul Manafort's home in July of 2017. In both the Stone and Manafort cases, investigators said they simply did not believe the men could be trusted to hand over their actual records. I want to bring in NBC's Kristen Welker at the White House. Kristen, there's two different things going on here. The president could be shouting, complaining, quacking on Twitter and anywhere else, or he could be putting forth an actual investigation, a file to look into how this happened. What are we getting here?
Well, Steph, the White House hasn't clarified yet whether President Trump is serious about that. What we do know is that his language about the Roger Stone arrest certainly fits into a broader pattern that we've seen from this president when it comes to the special counsel's investigation into Russian meddling. He frequently lashes out.
But it is important for his viewers to know that this was an arrest pursuant to a warrant issued by a judge after Roger Stone had been indicted by a grand jury. And they had the agents had authorized to do a search warrant at his home. So they were there for that purpose, pursuant to a usual protocol of going at 6 a.m. For a number of reasons, to make sure the person is at home, to make sure there's a minimum of disruption to the neighborhood and minimize the potential of danger. And they were there to look for evidence as well as arresting him. And as you said, it was laid out why they needed to do it this way as opposed to having him surrender, because he had been indicted for obstruction of justice and lying, including lies about whether or not not he had text communications. And part of the reason for that lie, I understand, is to make sure that Congress, which was asking him these questions, wouldn't be able to follow up and actually get that evidence, those text messages. And so even if those texts already were in the possession of Mueller's team, there could have been other evidence on the premises in hard drives, other computers, and all really recent communications with other people, potential co-conspirators, trying to get their stories straight. And you don't want to tip somebody off that they're about to be arrested so that they can tell other people to get their stories straight or flee or anything like that.
Well, I'm kind of laughing at this idea of Roger Stone as a victim, and the fact that you've got Lindsey Graham and others out here trying to paint this picture that it is so horrifying to see him arrested the way he was. Please spare me. Just walk into any other neighborhood in this country when the police are executing warrants and arresting people in the dead of night. It's the same scenario. It's the same thing. When they've got the goods on you, they're coming after you. Roger Stone knew that. He telegraphed that for over 6 months. So he knew where he was, and he knew at any moment his good night's rest would be by the police. And everyone else in this town knew it. So this idea of now sitting back and trying to say, oh, this is so horrible, what happened to poor Roger Stone? Spare me. The fact of the matter is, to the congressman's point, this is a process that has been played out over and over again by many others who, within the president's circle, the president's men, if you will, have gotten themselves caught.
It is Friday, the 1st of February of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We deserve it, folks. It's been a long week, indeed. And the French 77s are all lined up for you. Please imbibe. We got to start early now. Well, right now, since I'm in the bubble, I have to shut all the news off because at some point I'm in a bubble. I'm not sure if Don Jr. has been indicted yet. I think actually the indictments come down in a few more hours, or maybe even this evening. It is Mueller Friday, as well as Blue Moon Spirits Friday. Drink up. Okay, well, of course, Don Sr. is on a Twitter storm. Has been most of the morning, but that's only because it's Mueller Friday, and he knows. He knows. Oh, but he is hightailing it out of town, finally getting to Mar-a-Lago. I think that's one of the reasons why it's been so, shall we say, frantic in the White House lately. And apparently he feels that he set the table. He said, set the table. Somebody just taught him that. He has set the table for his confrontation with Nancy Pelosi, that little beat. Yeah, he's decided not to be nice to her anymore. And I'm thinking, oh, man. Yeah, well, you'll be smiling when you get the shiv right in the front, buddy. She doesn't stab people in the back. She looks him right in the eye, and they love her for it. Who wields the power, buddy? He thinks he's going to build the wall without Congress or anybody. Who is he going to command the U.S. military to do it? As last I checked, Congress still holds the purse strings on the military too. I know they have all those slush funds to fight all their weird secret wars, but yeah, do you really think a gold-plated screw costs $800 million? Really? Because there's not really even a gold-plated screw. They just say that. But the $800 million, yeah, it's in some slush fund somewhere. Trust me. Ask Oliver North. He knows. Which reminds me, what happened to the funding stream for the NRA? It's almost like Russia cut them off. I think they did. And they were doing pretty good there for a while. So it beggars the question, how long was, the FSB padding the coffers of the NRA? Probably at least since before Ben Carson was dealing with evangelicals here in the United States, who were dealing with Russian oligarchs and nationalists over there in Russia. And we will definitely be getting into that story later on here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Roger Stone is going to be getting a court-ordered gag order. I know that sounds redundant because it totally is. Regardless, gag order, and now he is on a media blitz. Oh, God. And how many costume changes does this guy do in one press conference? I mean, I can understand, a new costume when you go from one press conference and then to another press conference that day, and you might have 2 or 3 of them. I know Roger Stone. I don't know. I mean, here, let me take a break, and he comes back and he's dressed in something different. Clothes horse much? Well, he's a swinger kind of guy, literally. Well, it is laughable that Roger Stone is a victim. Yep, even Michael Steele says so, and he ought to know. I mean, he worked on that side for a long time. And I don't think Michael Steele thought that what Roger Stone had been doing was really such a bad thing until now. You reap what you sow, as they say. As we move on to the rest of the menu, whistleblower Tricia Newbold was suspended less than a week after reports that Jared Kushner's top secret security clearance was approved over staff objections. Well, that's an interesting story, and I'd like to see more of that, and we will. A former IBM executive says she was ordered not to comply with a federal agency's request that the company disclose the names of employees over 50 who had been laid off. Big Blue, loyal to their employees to the very end. And a United Arab Emirates senior diplomat denied his country had targeted American citizens in a cyberspying program that involved a hacking team of U.S. mercenaries. Do I hear the strains of Eric Prince somewhere? Do I? After the break, we then move to the chef's table, where newly emerged photos shows Ben Carson with a key employee of a sanctioned Russian oligarch. And Siberian cave findings shed light on the enigmatic extinct human species of Denisovans. The mystery species, all that and more, on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the rightish of the page, is the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly, for doing that. Also, do check out her shows on Saturday, the first being At the Table with Kelly Lincoln. That begins at 3 p.m. on the West Coast. Of course, that would be 6 p.m. on the East Coast. And then later on that night, she teams up with Ricky May for the Round Table Roundhouse Power Hour at 9 p.m. West Coast, midnight on the East Coast. And it goes for a whole power hour. Now, if you would look to the leftish of our homepage, at netrootsradio.com, from the chat room link, there is the contribute button. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, you are putting a big dent into Resistance Radio's paying its bills, and thank you for that. The generosity is much appreciated, and we still need to increase our revenue stream, as they say, so thank you for helping us do that. You can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that platform, and we are forever grateful that he does that. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. Of course, I am there as Justice Putnam. It's my real name. It's not my full name, but it's my real name. And you can get podcasts of Netroot. Oh, first, before podcasts, you can also follow West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on Twitter at Cookbook West, and get podcasts of the show by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, YouTube, iHeart, and wherever fine podcasts can be found. Just a reminder on station news next week, towards the end of next week, I will be driving down to Southern California for my father's 90th birthday, and it looks like we're going to have over 60 people now, so that's great. And so I will probably be leaving on Thursday. I may or may not have a show that day. I don't know what will be happening on Friday. That would be the 8th. And in terms of the show, but in terms of the station, do not worry. We will have somewhat of a modified schedule from that time through the weekend. I expect to be back here on Tuesday, and I hope I have a show. So we'll be driving all day Monday, and I hope I get in, but that might be cutting it pretty short. But just stay tuned. There'll be somewhat of a modified schedule, and we will attempt to get as much of our regular content up, so it will be uninterrupted. But it is uninterrupted. You will have radio. And do not worry, K-Grill in the Morning will be available Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, whenever. So there. All right. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. And really, the cocktail of choice here, because my choice is the French 77, the most balanced cocktail in the history of cocktails. And it wasn't just made to cover up the bad taste of bootleg liquor, no matter what they say about craft cocktails. Okay, let's see. Who has written this? Do they even tell me? It comes from NBC News. Oh, yes, Laura Strickler and Peter Alexander, of course. A White House security specialist has been suspended without pay for defying her supervisor, Carl Klein. Less than a week after NBC News reported that Klein approved Jared Kushner for a top security clearance over the objections of career staff. And he not only did it for Jared, but for 30 other people. So I think we've got a spy hunt in the White House and throughout the machinery of government. We do. This is not hyperbole by any means. The specialist, Tricia Newbold, has filed a discrimination complaint against Klein 3 months ago. Newbold's 2-week suspension from the White House Security Office was for failure to supervise, failure to follow instructions, and defiance of authority, according to the suspension decision notice obtained by NBC News. Security Office Chief Creed Bailey first proposed the suspension on December 3rd of 2018. You are not loyal to half your. Wednesday's notice is signed by Bailey and mentions that in Newbold's 18-year career, she has not faced any prior formal disciplinary action. The document also harshly criticizes Newbold for her defiance, and that Newbold said she would continue to do what is best for the executive office of the president. In the notice, the chief security officer denies that the suspension has anything to do with Newbold's Equal Employment Opportunity Commission complaint. Wink, wink, sure it doesn't. Newbold's lawyer, Ed Passman, considers her a whistleblower and said he believes the administrative charge was brought as payback for her decision to file the complaint against Klein. It's clearly reprisal for her whistleblowing, Passman said. It has no basis in merit whatsoever. Now, Newbold told NBC News, I feel confidently that this is completely unwarranted, and I am also confident that I have done nothing wrong. Every decision I and my team have made have always been in the best interest of the United States. There is no compromise of personal identifiable information or sensitive information. Asked about Newbold's suspension, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders said, "We don't comment on personnel issues unless we leak it to you." Not only, see, this is how petty this group works. Remember that Klein was installed into this position to essentially fast track security clearances at the highest level, except the CIA clamped it down and said, "No, you're not getting that high of one, Jared, or any of the others." But this Klein guy went in there, and he is a career employee. He is civil service, but he got put into a position of a political nature, ordered to fast track these security clearances, which he did. And then the pettiness of it. Newbold has a rare form of dwarfism, and in her EEOC complaint, she's accused Klein of discriminating against her. Now, this occurred after she and her team said, "These people can't get these security clearances." And he said, "Oh, yeah, they will." So, in reprisal, he moved security files to a new location that were too high and out of her reach. And then he said to her, "You have people. Have them get you the files you need, or you can ask me." And that was part of her complaint. Now, two sources who did not want to be identified confirmed to NBC that Klein had moved files out of Newbold's reach. Not only dangerous to national security and the whole being of the United States, but the pettiness in its reprisals is emblematic of what this administration is truly about. This next offering here in the Bistro Cafe, a West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, is brought to us by ProPublica. And I just want to assure folks that any news that I may be bringing forth and any of its conclusions that I may advocate are not newly found in the realm of ageism. I want to remind folks, my father was actually quite an advocate himself of what was in the day called old age politics. And so we got a lot of petitions signed, and I went to a lot of meetings of the Gray Panthers. Boy, don't get on their wrong side. Trust me. Okay, so in sworn testimony filed recently as part of a class action lawsuit against IBM, a former executive says she was ordered not to comply with a federal agency's request that the company disclose the names of employees over 50 who'd been laid off from her business unit, and IBM fired her when she did that, and they fired her for what they called gross misconduct. Follow the law, get fired. Catherine Rogers, a vice president who was then IBM's senior executive in Nevada, cited the order among several practices she had said prompted her to warn IBM superiors the company was leaving itself open to allegations of age discrimination. She claimed she was fired in 2017 because of the warnings. Company spokesman Edward Barbini labeled Rogers' claims related to potential age discrimination false, adding that the reasons for her firing were wholly unrelated to her allegations. Yeah, she followed the law and gave a federal agency what was required by law, and they fired her for that. It had nothing to do with her age, but it was basically the information that the federal agency would look to see if the company was practicing age discrimination. She said in an interview that IBM appears to be engaged in a concerted and disproportionate targeting of older workers. She said if the company releases the ages of those laid off, something required by federal law and that IBM did until 2014, the facts will speak for themselves. IBM is, after all, a data company. Release the data, she said. Rogers' accounts of IBM practices is similar to those reported by ProPublica. Among the parallels, Rogers said that all layoffs in her business unit were of older workers and that younger workers were unaffected. She said that she and other managers were told to encourage workers flagged for a layoff to use IBM's internal hiring system to find other jobs in the company, even as upper management erected insurmountable barriers to their being hired for those jobs. You're on a treadmill and you're just a guinea pig rat. Rogers said the company reversed a decades-long practice of encouraging employees to work from home and ordered many to begin reporting to a few hub offices around the country, a change she said appeared designed to prompt people to quit. She said that in one case, an employee agreed to relocate to Connecticut, only to be told to relocate again to North Carolina. Up and down, around and around. Barbini, the IBM spokesman, did not comment on individual elements of Rogers' allegations, and last year he did not address a 10-page summary of ProPublica's findings, but issued a statement that read in part, "We are proud of our company and our employees' ability to reinvent themselves era after era, while always complying with the law." Joel Scheckman and Christopher Bing bring us this last offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and they write for Reuters. A United Arab Emirates senior diplomat denied yesterday his country had targeted friendly countries or American citizens in a cyber spying program that a Reuters report said involved a hacking team of U.S. mercenaries. The investigation, published yesterday, found that the UAE used a group of American intelligence contractors to help hack rival governments, dissidents, and human rights activists. The contractors, former U.S. intelligence operatives, formed a core part of UAE's cyber hacking program called Project Raven. Project Raven also targeted Americans and the Apple Inc. iPhones of embassy staff for France, Australia, and the UK, according to former operatives and program documents reviewed by Reuters. Apple has declined to comment and did not immediately respond to a request for comment yesterday because they're trying to figure out what the hell's going on. When asked about Project Raven by reporters at a briefing in New York, UAE Minister of State for Foreign Affairs Anwar Gargash acknowledged the country has a cyber capability, but denied targeting U.S. citizens or countries with which it has good relations. We live in a very difficult part of the world. We have to protect ourselves. We don't target friendly countries, and we don't target American citizens. But if you get caught up in collateral damage, hey, that's the way it was written. Lawrence, it was written. The French and UK embassies in Washington have declined to comment. A spokeswoman for the Australian Ministry of Foreign Affairs had declined to comment. and the U.S. State Department did not immediately respond to a request for comment because there's still no one in that office that has been hired to respond to comment. Let's get on to our break. And when we come back from the break, we are, of course, going to go through weather from around the world. If weather hasn't hit you, we'll hit you with the weather. And then we're going to finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, Ground Glass. Back in 2000, before Marvel Studios existed, before Sam Raimi rocked the radioactive spider bite, 3 years after Joel Schumacher tried to kill the Batman franchise and bury it in concrete, and just a few months after the world had been introduced to Patrick Stewart in a wheelchair and Hugh Jackman in claws, writer, producer, director M. Night Shyamalan sneaked Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson in a smart, grounded superhero movie right under our noses with Unbreakable. And then he moved on. Shyamalan says he's not one for sequels. He's dubious about the ability to recreate or recapture a feeling. So it was a surprise when 16 years later, his serial killer thriller Split with James McAvoy and Anya Taylor-Joy revealed itself to have been set in the Unbreakable universe. Now Shyamalan brings his three stars together to complete the trilogy that we never thought to hope for in Glass. To call Glass a superhero movie is to give you unfair expectations. There are no capes, no tights, no terabytes of CGI. Yes, there are people with powers, but they exist in a grounded world that is sure of the possibility that such powers can exist. In fact, the problem of believing in these powers sits at the crux of the movie, a movie that feels so confident. Shyamalan is ready to go in Glass. He knows these characters, he knows the story he wants to tell, and he does not wait for you. If you haven't seen Unbreakable and Split, then you'll still pick up who's who and what's at stake, but you'll feel like you just joined the book in chapter 10. Willis and Jackson do what they do, but it's really McAvoy as Kevin Wendell Crumb and his dozen or so different personalities that steal the show. It is sick to see McAvoy work his acting chops. His characterizations are so great, which makes sense because he's already had a whole movie to build them. As much as Shyamalan likes to keep moving forward, trying new genres, telling new stories, maybe there's something to be said for taking a moment to stand on familiar ground. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. The time 300,000 years ago. The scene, a herd of horses struggling in mud. A short 5 meters away, a group of early Neanderthal hunters throwing a volley of wooden spears towards the animals.
And then probably coming into an injured horse and then perhaps finishing it off with a thrusting spear.
Anamika Milks, a Paleolithic archaeologist at University College London. But there's something not quite right about that classic scene, she says. Specifically, the Neanderthals' spears may have been more sophisticated and more lethal than we've given them credit for, which would alter that ancient tableau.
We believe that Neanderthals could have thrown them from farther away, that would have allowed them to approach animals that maybe weren't disadvantaged, and they wouldn't have necessarily needed to come right up close to the animal to kill it off with a thrust. Some of these shots with a throwing spear could be lethal to an animal like that if they hit in the right way.
This revised assessment of Neanderthal weaponry began with the crafting of spruce timber into replicas of an actual 300,000-year-old spear. The surface was finished with the same kinds of stone tools used to make the original. Milks then recruited 6 male javelin throwers to chuck the replicas at a hay bale. At 5 meters, they struck the target more than half the time. At 10 to 15 meters, a quarter of the time. But from 20 meters, just 1 in 6 throws hit the hay.
I mean, it's still not amazing accuracy, I have to say. I was hoping for better.
Though she points out that the javelin throwers aren't trained to hit targets, something Neanderthals may have been more skilled at, and the experiment suggests the weapons were at least capable of sailing much farther than had been thought. And high-speed video of the throws proved the spears could strike with deadly force. The research is in the journal Scientific Reports. The crafting of these ancient spears also suggests some degree of intelligence, a concept of or intuition about balance, mass, and design. For example, whoever crafted these ancient spears used the denser, lower part of the tree trunk for the spear tips, intended to strike prey. But we still don't know which Neanderthals used the spears in battle.
I want to emphasize that we chose male athletes rather than female athletes, not because we don't think that women were playing a role in hunting, but because we needed a homogeneous sample. But I'd be very curious to know how women did in terms of accuracy.
Perhaps another round of tests with women throwers can address that point. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
For an expectant mother, taking care of her developing baby means taking good care of herself. One way she can do this is by ensuring she gets vaccinated. If a woman is or might be pregnant during flu season, it's especially important to get her annual flu shot, preferably before the end of October. In addition, women should be vaccinated against whooping cough during the 3rd trimester of each pregnancy. Failure to get vaccinated places both mother and baby at increased risk for serious complications of these infections, including hospitalization and even death. If you're pregnant or planning to get pregnant, ask your healthcare provider when you should get your vaccines. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
This is an important message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. When it snows this winter, make sure you clear more than your driveway. Before you hit the road and before you get in the driver's seat, check to be sure that your vehicle's tailpipe is clear of snow. If the tailpipe is blocked, carbon monoxide, an odorless, colorless, and deadly gas produced by your engine can build up quickly inside your vehicle, poisoning anyone inside. To learn more, call 1-800-CDC-INFO. That's 1-800-232-4636.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Can a 1-year-old in diapers be expected to adequately represent him or herself before an immigration judge? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute, and that question really is not as insane as it sounds, because in 2018, that really happened. Happened because an immigration court, which is considered a civil proceeding in contrast to a criminal one, a person is not entitled to a court-appointed lawyer. If you don't have the money for an attorney, you're on your own. As Tova Indritz, in the recent edition of The Champion, the magazine of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, wrote, this distinction of criminal versus civil actually makes little sense. You're entitled to have a lawyer provided if you are indigent and face any time in jail, but if you face almost certain murder if you're deported, then you're on your own to represent yourself in immigration court. There is a case pending in the federal courts that raises the issue whether children or persons who are mentally challenged must be provided with counsel in immigration court. But, as Indritz points out, even if that case should win, the larger injustice remains unsolved. Everyone in immigration court who faces deportation should have a lawyer. Justice requires no less. And every day in immigration courts across the United States, justice is denied. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
The government shutdown may be over for now, but the fight over a border wall is at a standstill.
In an ice-cold capital, frozen positions from the president and House Speaker.
If there's no wall, it doesn't work. And if they don't have a wall, I don't even want to waste my time reading what they have.
Speaker Nancy Pelosi is clear.
There's not going to be any wall money in the legislation.
In a new interview with the New York Times on Thursday, Donald Trump admitted he won't be satisfied with any deal the bipartisan group of 17 lawmakers now negotiating agree on, calling the exercise a, quote, waste of time, saying he'll likely go ahead and declare a national emergency and use his executive power to build his stupid wall anyway.
I think Nancy Pelosi is hurting our country very badly by doing what she's doing. And ultimately, I think I've set the table very nicely. I think people understand. Well, they understand, Peter. They didn't know what was going on in the southern border. Now they know. They had no idea the amount of crime, the amount of drugs, the amount of human trafficking, which can be stopped with a proper system.
Set the table for an emergency declaration.
I've set the table. I've set the stage for doing what I'm going to do.
And you'll wait out for 21 days before you take it?
Yeah, I'm going to wait till the 15th. I think it's a waste of time.
So the President of the United States admits to the paper of record that he'll circumvent Congress if their negotiations don't provide his ransom demands, $5.7 billion for a border wall. Not only is Trump threatening to disregard the authority of a co-equal branch of government, he's also undermining the entire intelligence community. You'll recall that on Tuesday, Director of National Intelligence Dan Coats, along with CIA Director Gina Haspel, FBI Director Christopher Wray, and other senior intelligence officials, delivered a report and testified before a Senate hearing on the most urgent global threats facing the United States. Their testimony contradicted many of Trump's ridiculous opinions related to national security. For example,
ISIS is intent on resurging and still commands thousands of fighters in Iraq and Syria.
We've beaten them, and we've beaten them badly.
We currently assess that North Korea will seek to retain its WMD capabilities and is unlikely to completely give up its nuclear weapons and production capabilities.
And the big thing is it will be a total denuclearization, which is already taking place.
You get the idea. Trump lashed out at the intelligence chiefs on Twitter, calling their assessments wrong and suggesting that, quote, intelligence should go back to school. On Thursday afternoon, Trump claimed there was no disagreement, instead claiming that the testimony was, quote, mischaracterized by the media, even claiming that intelligence officials had called it, quote, fake news.
Mr. President, did you talk to your intelligence chiefs today about the displeasure you had with their testimony?
I did, and they said that they were totally misquoted and they were totally, it was taken out of context. So what I do is I'd suggest that you call them. They said it was fake news, so which frankly didn't surprise me.
We just ran exactly what they said to Congress.
Excuse me. It didn't surprise me at all. But we're here to talk right now about China.
Did the fact they didn't bring up the border as the world threat assessment, did that undermine or undercut what you said that there's a crisis at the border?
We need a wall, and if we don't have a wall, we're never going to have security for our country.
But they didn't bring it up as part of the national security assessment. Does that undercut?
Please.
Again, the hearing before the Senate Intelligence Committee was public and carried on multiple TV networks. Coats, speaking on behalf of the other 5 witnesses, submitted 42 pages of written testimony on a wide range of security threats. And video of the hearing was posted on the committee's website. But back to the wall for a moment. One of Trump's claims in favor of the wall is that drugs are pouring in through openings along the southern border. The fact is that most of the drugs are brought in through legal ports of entry, like this.
Customs and Border Protection says its officers found 254 pounds of fentanyl, more than twice the previous record seizure and worth $3.5 million. It was discovered in a truck trying to come from Mexico through the border checkpoint in Nogales, Arizona. When it drove through an X-ray scanner, officers noted something unusual about the floor of the cargo area. A drug-sniffing dog alerted to a spot in the truck that was loaded with cucumbers.
CBP officers discovered a non-factory compartment built under the trailer's floor, revealing numerous packages.
They also found nearly 400 pounds of methamphetamine. Fentanyl, a synthetic opioid, is up to 100 times more powerful than heroin, blamed for more than 28,000 overdose deaths in the U.S. in 2017. Despite President Trump's claims of smuggling all along the border, federal agents say most of the drugs come from Mexico through the checkpoints. Pete Williams, NBC News, Washington.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced Friday morning that the U.S. is formally withdrawing from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Agreement with Russia. The pact, signed in 1987, has kept the development of nuclear missiles in check since the days of the Cold War. And finally, the polar vortex seems to be on its way out, and not a second too soon.
In Michigan, the town of Hell froze over.
And that's a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. A worsening political and economic crisis in Venezuela has pushed more than 3 million people to flee the country. But a new report finds Venezuela's neighbors aren't closing their doors or erecting border walls to halt the exodus.
We found that most countries have been both generous and pragmatic in their responses.
Jessica Bolter is a research associate at the Migration Policy Institute.
They have recognized that regularizing Venezuelan migrants, giving them some sort of legal permit, work authorization, identification is the best way to allow these migrants to contribute, the host countries and communities to benefit, and to allow the government to know who's in their territory.
Colombia, which hosts more than 1.1 million Venezuelans, offers a prime example of that generosity. President Ivan Duque has pledged to continue welcoming Venezuelans with open arms, and his country is one of several to create special visa categories, allowing Venezuelans to remain there legally. Others view the arrival of skilled Venezuelans as a welcome change to migration flows in countries long used to their citizens leaving for opportunities elsewhere.
Argentina has actually been trying to match skilled workers, professionals, with areas in the country that are in need of those professionals. Peru has also expressed interest in doing a similar program.
But there's a fear it takes only one country closing its doors to Venezuelans to cause a bottleneck and push other countries to close their doors as well, making recent developments in Ecuador particularly concerning.
Ecuador just this past week implemented a new requirement at its border requiring Venezuelans to present a certification of a clean criminal record. These certifications are extremely difficult to get in Venezuela, and few, if any, migrants are traveling with them.
Luke Vargas, the United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, and the French 77s. If you finished the first one, you do have a second one, but I would suggest don't go past that second. In fact, half of that might put you under the table. It does some people. It is the most balanced cocktail in the history of cocktails. That's why it's a little bit hard to not imbibe too far. But we'll take care of you, don't worry. Okay, we always begin weather from around the world. Along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Oh, yes. Right now the winds are out of the east-northeast, light and variable, though they are going to pick up in about an hour to two when they will shift out of the southeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour, bringing with it copious amounts of rain. Expecting a little bit something less than a quarter inch. And then later on tonight, the winds will have then shifted out of the east proper at its same rate of 5 to 10 miles per hour. And we're expecting about a third of an inch of rain and then something less than a third tomorrow. And then rain and snow flurries on Sunday and Monday. So I guess maybe I won't be driving anywhere for the Super Bowl. Like I really do. I'm not a kid anymore. I don't need to go anywhere. Of course, when I was younger, we used to have big old Super Bowl parties. Do you remember those? Big old projection screen TV? Yeah. I even had a Super Bowl party with a fondue set, and people loved it. And that wasn't that long ago. Not at all. Okay, pollen is rated at none. The air quality index has inched a bit up into the moderate range at 78 parts per million. And the daytime UV index is low at 2. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.47 inches. Visibility is at 8 miles. And relative humidity is 97%. Any more than that, and I think we'd be swimming. We might be. In due time. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 36 degrees Fahrenheit with rain and snow. Paris is 45 and cloudy. Rome is 58 and mostly cloudy, and they have a wind advisory. Ow. Kiev is 34 with fog. Kabul is 33 and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 61 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 38 degrees and clear with a weather advisory of another dry air advisory. So they dip down into the freezing cold, and it is dry as, well, as we like to say in SoCal, all get out. Whoa. Okay, so Sydney, Australia is 73 with a rain shower. San Francisco, California is 52 and mostly cloudy with a flood warning and a gale warning. Wow, I'm driving through there next week. And New York is 15 degrees Fahrenheit, cloudy, and that's pretty damn cold, so you guys better stay warm. I hope you can. And that is Weather from Around the World, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Casey Michelle of Think Progress brings us this next offering here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And I should mention that Casey did mention that she was part of the reporters that have been targeted by the Russian intelligence operation and influence operation. So I just need to put that out there because she has been in the news a little bit because of that. And apparently it didn't work. Yeah, our investigative reporters are actually pretty good, aren't they? In the latest example of Russian officials rubbing elbows with members of the American right, a newly emerged photo shows Housing and Urban Development Secretary Ben Carson standing alongside a key employee of sanctioned Russian oligarch Konstantin Maloviv. And it could be Maloviv. The photo dates to June 2014 and appears to be from Carson's appearance as a keynote speaker at the 2014 gala for the National Organization for Marriage, one of the most notorious anti-LGBTQ organizations in existence. Alexei Komov has worked for years to ingratiate himself with the American right, from partnering with American homeschool organizations to working with Christian fundamentalist groups to even liaisoning closely with Christian movie reviewers. The photo appeared on the Twitter account of Larry Jacobs, the former managing director of the World Congress of Families. That organization is the main bridge between sanctioned Russian officials and American Christian fundamentalists. Oh, you mean traitors. Jacobs, who also appeared in the photo, has described Russia as the hope of the world, and that Russians might be the Christian saviors of the world because of how white they are. Oh, I added that little last embellishment. But that's what they mean, because Russia is considered to be white utopia.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Will Dunham brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table, a West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Scientists using sophisticated techniques to determine the age of bone fragments, teeth, and artifacts unearthed in a Siberian cave have provided new insight into a mysterious extinct human species that may have been more advanced than previously known. Research published on Wednesday shed light on the species called Denisovans, known only from scrappy remains from Denisova Cave in the foothills of the Altai Mountains in Russia. We need to have a few good stories about Russia now, shan't we? While still enigmatic, they left a genetic mark on our species, Homo sapiens, particularly among indigenous populations in Papua New Guinea and Australia that retain a small but significant percentage of Denisovan DNA, evidence of past interbreeding between the species. Scientists later describe the Denisova Cave bone fragment of a girl whose mother was a Neanderthal and father a Denisovan. The girl, nicknamed Denny, lived around 100,000 years ago. Pendants made of animal teeth and bone points from the cave were determined to be between 43,000 and 49,000 years old, and it looks like they were crafted by Denisovans, suggesting a degree of intellectual sophistication, of course. Traditionally, these objects are associated in Western Europe with the expansion of our species and are seen as hallmarks of behavioral modernity. But in this case, Denisovans may be their authors. And that was Katerina Duca of the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Human History in Germany. Our species, of course, arose in Africa roughly about 300,000 years ago, later spreading worldwide. And there is no evidence Homo sapiens had reached Denisova Cave when these objects were made. And their DNA in modern Australian Aboriginal and New Guinean people tantalizingly suggests that they may have been quite widespread in Asia and possibly even Southeast Asia. But we're going to need to find some hard evidence of their presence in these regions to flesh out the full story of the Denisovans. Richard Roberts of the University of Wollongong in Australia said. All right, and the research was published in the journal Nature. That brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week. It is Mueller Friday, so there's going to be news all through the weekend. And we'll meet up on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day, all night, all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up on Monday right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.